Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 10 of Two Ball, Two Bold. I am Marshon Parker,
I'm Nathan Tomlin.
and we are two bald men. You can't tell because I'm wearing a hat, but two bald men who are family men, who are bankers by day, and sports fans as well. So, with episode 10, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the impact and effect of NIL on all levels of sports. Nathan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, NIL is name, image, and likeness,
Mhm.
right? So, for those of you that didn't know exactly what it stood for, um, and just a real recap of how we got to this point.
Yeah.
In 2009, Ed O'Bannon, UCLA forward on the last UCLA basketball championship team in the mid 90s, he started a class action lawsuit against the NCAA for using name, image, and likeness without compensation in an EA Sports video game, EA Sports March Madness. Used to play those, and I can't believe I did not mention. I think it was '08 with Kevin Love on the cover.
Mhm.
Was one of the ones
Oh,
being a couple of my '09. Yes,
Mhm.
no. Kevin Love was on the cover of '08 because I think, yeah. But anyway, one of those ones. Anyway, and we used to play that all the time, and we'd create a. That's anyway. Um, so that started the process in 2015. Northwestern came with a suit. They did a class action suit, and the federal courts upheld the O'Bannon verdict, and that the NCAA's amateurism laws were unlawful, or rules were unlawful. In 2019, California created the Fair Pay to Play Act that would go into effect in 2023. That the NCAA could not prohibit collegiate athletes from earning money.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you remember that. That was right before COVID. And
Yes.
that made it to where now the question was, okay, how's this going to impact college sports? Because California, of course, has a lot of colleges, big sports, right? USC, UCLA, Cal, Stanford, not to mention all the other colleges in that state that weren't in a big conference. Um, in 2020, Colorado, Nebraska, New Jersey, and Florida enacted similar laws, and they'd go into effect in 2022 or 2023, depending on the state. Also in 2020, the NAIA allowed NIL.
Mhm.
Obviously, not going to be the type of money we're going to be talking about here on this episode, but still a big move there. And then in 2021, the U.S. Supreme Court, NCAA State versus Alston, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the NCAA appeals of the antitrust lawsuit from 2015, and that led to the NCAA interim NIL policy that would take effect pretty much immediately, that allowed student athletes to benefit off of name, image, and likeness. Now, there were interim laws until this year.
Mhm.
Starting August 1st, the NCAA has about three basic NIL rules. One is that the student athlete has to disclose any NIL deal valued at $600 or more to their school within the first 30 days. And that does have to include the terms of the contract, the contact information for who the NIL deal is with, and it is also even for prospective students as well. So if you're not quite enrolled yet, you still have to let either the college you're going to know, or just, I guess, publicly make it known. And then also the amount of the compensation. So it is public. Schools can help identify and facilitate NIL deals, but they cannot actually pay athletes. Neither can the boosters. Now, NIL deals are the people that can make NIL deals with athletes, student athletes. Can be companies, are typically third party. So it could be a company. For instance, a big one down here in Georgia was last year, or last couple years, Brock Bowers had one with Zaxby's, which
Yeah.
is the chicken franchise. And for those of you that don't know what that is, and that was huge because Raising Cane's is in the heart of Athens and is huge with the students of UGA. So Brock Bowers being the most popular football player, at least last year. Before that, Stetson Bennett probably was. In Georgia, having NIL deal with Zaxby's was huge, right? That's the example of one, but there can also be third parties that can actually be created as 501c3s, by the way, to where they can take free donations to give out as NIL. There is no limit in terms of the amount that's set by the NCAA. So it's not like you can put a certain dollar amount. Hey, you can't make more than this, or any deal can't be this. There's not a limit on the amount of deals an athlete can get.
No salary.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then, so that's pretty much how it works with the NIL. They do what are called valuations. So, for instance, the last year, the top 2 student athletes for valuations, which they take into account, just like a market valuation for a business.
Yeah.
The top 2 athletes, the male athlete was Bronny James, was valued at $5.8 million, based on Instagram followers and his influence that he had, right? Which most of that we can assume is from his father, not from his play.
Yeah.
And then for women's, it was Olivia Dunn. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but she's the LSU gymnast.
Yeah, very popular.
Who has like over 3 million followers or something on social media. She was valued at, I think, 3.7 million. And of course, she's famously, I don't know if she's dating or engaged to Paul Skeens, pitcher for the Pirates, who pitched at LSU, was a top pick. So they do valuations. Of course, they could end up getting paid more than that. It all really just kind of depends. A lot of NIL deals, again, they can't be from the school, but a lot of the companies or third parties that do it make it region-based. So if you do transfer, you do lose whatever's left of your deal. For instance, Quinn Ewers was a real popular one. Went to, I think it was Ohio State.
Yeah.
Transferred to Texas. And when he transferred to Texas, he got like a 3-year, $1.4 million deal. Whatever NIL deal he had in Ohio got canceled because he was no longer in that region. He took the one in Texas and went to Texas. So again, it's not the University of Texas paying him.
It's a collective.
But correct. But I will say this. I do have a source. I'm not going to name the source or what school or anything. That is an alumni of a university and has been tried to be brought into one of these third parties. And he said the issue that they have and what he's worried about is if you break a law, the third party and the members of that party could potentially face jail time, right? So you have to be really careful about what you're doing with it and everything. So, and then every state actually has, some states are 30 states that have NIL laws on the books. There are 20 that don't. And then every conference has their own set of laws in terms of the amounts, and things of that sort. So I'm not going to really go into the individuals on that, but it does differ by conference and everything as well. So anyway, that's kind of an overview of NIL, how we got here and what it is. And because of that, thank God, NCAA football is back.
Yes.
The video game.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so for today's episode, Marshon came up with 4 to 6 questions he's going to pose. I have not heard these questions, so he doesn't know what I'm going to say, and we're going to have just kind of an organic conversation from that. It's going to be based on NIL and the effects that it has on players, on the sports, potentially on the conferences. Again, I have no idea what he's going to ask, so I'll pass it back on over to Marshon to see if his interviewing questions are really good, and maybe he'll have a future as a reporter.
Hey, who knows? We'll see. I mean, look, Two Bald already has sources. We've got sources already.
Sources, man. Sources.
This is amazing. Now, you know what? I bet you most people would have thought that for men it was Caleb Williams and for women it was Caitlin Clark. I guarantee you could have won big money if we would, if people knew that it was. I knew it was her because I knew she had such a huge following, and those LSU girls last year were just getting paid in general. But I knew the gymnast Olivia. Is Olivia Dunn? Is it Olivia?
I think it's Dunn. It's Dunn or Dunny. I don't know.
Yeah, or something like that. And I knew Bronny was because I had seen that report before. But again, I think a lot of people might have thought it was either Caleb Williams or maybe I think a lot of people might have even thought it was Shador or Travis Hunter. But no, definitely Bronny. And but here's the questions that we're posing because NIL deal, you did an excellent job of painting the picture because I don't know if people really, a lot of people don't even, you're right, a lot of people don't know what NIL even means. They just know it's NIL and they don't know how intricate it is where it differs per state, and that's why you see some of these transfers all the way down to the high school level. One of the main reasons, like you mentioned, Quinn Ewers, the reason he reclassified and went to Ohio State because of the fact that Texas high school students at that time weren't able to take advantage of using NIL. So he went to Ohio State at, I believe, 17, took advantage of a deal, and then I think the whole time they probably had a plan that, hey, we're going to transfer to Texas 1 year later. But nonetheless, so here's where we start. Okay. Now we agree NIL deal has been abound for it's not just a college thing. At this point, it's a high school thing as well, right?
Mhm.
So we have seen how college has changed with the transfer portal, right? Now, will we see a transfer portal type of movement in high school sports?
Well, yeah, I think you already do. So before, and I think it's still going to be a lot this way because, again, there are going to be laws at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be rules, even for the schools can have their own governing rules because they're their own governing bodies as well, and to a certain extent. But I do think I think we already see it with high school because there are private schools and there are public schools, right?
Yeah.
And public schools are going to have a harder time because public schools are going to have it's going to have to really be third party alumni that are really kind of trying to bring you in, because the regional aspect isn't quite going to be there. Because if you're, like, say, a Zaxby's,
Mm-hmm.
you don't care where these kids go. If they're if they're somewhere in the southeast, you can still benefit from paying them. Not that Zaxby's is going to pay a high school athlete or not, but I saw before, man. I mean, I went to a public school, and in my 4 years of high school, the first 3 years of high school for me, we were in a league with one private school. And after our freshman game, it was at their school, our running back, they tried to recruit him. They're like, hey, you want to come over here and play? Right. And so at the time, how they recruited you, private schools, was free tuition.
Yeah.
Right. Or scholarships, maybe not
Yeah.
completely free, but you'd pay less to go to the private school than, let's say, you or I would, that's not getting that opportunity, right? That our parents want us to go there because it's a good education, and we're not good enough to get a scholarship, quote unquote. So I don't think it's going to change high school a whole lot in that regard. I think for the high end talent, it might, but you already saw that. You already saw high end talent already transferring, right? You have like IMG Academy in Florida. Oh, dude, how do they always have the best player? And then none of them are born in Florida, it seems like.
No.
They all move there for basketball. Oak Hill Academy, right, in Virginia, right? So you've already had that in high school. So I don't think it's going to affect high school as much.
Mm-hmm.
I think all it's going to do is the rich will get richer,
Mm-hmm.
because these schools now can offer more financial benefit legally than what they used to. Because, to me, I mean, if you're moving from out of state, that costs the parent money.
Yeah.
Now you could potentially offset that with this NIL deal,
Yes.
right? Even though it goes to the kid, let's be real. If the kid wants to do that, and that's what's the kid gonna do? They're 16. Yeah, Dad, I want to go there. Okay, well, then you're gonna have to give your money to me so we can move, right? Or whatever the case is. So I don't think in high school it's going to make much of a difference, except for now there's going to be more money going to the kids, which, as long as it stays with the kid,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing. But I really don't think it's going to change too much high school.
And the reason I posed this question was because of the fact that, when we see, okay, I'll give you an example, like Dylan Gabriel, he's going to be the quarterback for Oregon this year. And I was listening to a podcast, not a podcast, but a YouTube video yesterday, and I forgot. So Dylan Gabriel has played he was a really good quarterback for University of Central Florida first.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went to Oklahoma. Then I think a lot of people were surprised he transferred from Oklahoma to Oregon, but the freshman kid they had, Jackson Arnold, behind him, he was going to start this year, and I think the program knew it. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel knew it, but it's like, oh man, he's been a high level starter for 3 different teams. Like, you don't see that, and it had me thinking about the high school level where you're right. You would have a kid who maybe went to like the local public school that he, the city he grew up in, and then the private school comes along and they're like, hey, come on over here. We'll pay for your tuition. This and that and that. You come over here and you get more notoriety and you'll get a better education. But in terms of the movement, we're talking about maybe one or two cities over, so that's not a big deal. But when you start really introducing money to it, you brought up the big factor, which is if you're moving far away, now your parents have to pick up and move. And I'm curious, like, are we going to get to a point where when I say transfer portal, I mean like kids are literally moving around different states potentially? Because at that point, now you have to offer parents a place to live, a new job, things of that nature. And it's like, are we going to get to that point in high school sports?
Yeah, and that's where I think it's the difficult thing is because you you can't just ship your kid off. Now there are some schools that do that are
Yeah,
boarding schools, right?
IMG.
That that you don't have to, the parent doesn't have to go. But that's what I'm saying is, I don't think it's going to make a big difference
Hmm.
because of that reason. Because granted, more jobs are virtual now.
Yeah.
So potentially some parents are like, well, I'm virtual, so I can go anywhere.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you got to look at the cost of living. You got to look at, you got to buy a house or rent, or hey, maybe, and if the parents in a financially good enough situation to where they can just move and rent, then they could do that anyway,
Yeah.
right? So I don't really see it being a big difference
Hmm.
because I don't think the amount of money that you could pay to uproot a whole family.
Yeah.
Because, like, look at ourselves for now. Like, of course, we're dads. We
Hmm.
want to do what's right for our kid. You have multiple kids, right?
Yes.
I just have one. I would do almost anything for my child, but I also have to. I also have to make a living for
Yeah.
him, right? For myself and for my wife, and now my mother lives with me too. I have three people that my wife works too. I'm not saying she doesn't work, but you know, we have to work. We have to make money to pay bills and do everything else. So to uproot our whole life, I have to then me and my wife both would have to find new jobs. Okay, are those jobs going to be better?
Yeah.
Are we going to like them? Is it going to be a situation where we like? Do we even want to live in that area? So there's a lot of things that go on to it versus in college. The kids going to college,
Yeah.
the family doesn't have to go, right? I mean, you can give some incentives like, hey, man, we'll fly your family out, for all the games or whatever, but that's a weekend trip.
Mhm.
That's not permanent. You don't have to
Permanent.
uproot your whole life, your
Hmm.
job, your other, in your case, your other children
Hmm.
to go do that for your kid. Um, so I just really don't see it being big in high school, except at those top schools
Yeah.
where again, like you already are having that as it is. It's already going to be wealthy kids from wealthy families
Yeah.
that are able to do it, or it's going to be boarding school type of high schools that can do it because they can offer, and they don't even have to necessarily offer money. The money they're offering is, like, to your point, a better education, more exposure. Like if you start on IMG Academy, you're going to D1. Now,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
you know what I mean? Now you may not make it to the NFL, but guess what? You got a free college education,
Hmm.
right? And it depends on your work ethic, how hard you work, and how you develop. But you're also going to have better coaches there. Obviously, I'm sure they've spent a bunch of money on coaches,
Oh yeah.
trainers, all that kind of stuff, right? So you get better opportunities.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, for high school, I just don't see it. And to your point about Dylan Gabriel,
Yeah.
COVID, we're coming towards the end of the extra year because of COVID. He had an injury, plus he had the COVID year. So
Yeah.
he's like 20, going to be 25, I think, by the time he's done with his
Yeah.
college career.
Yeah.
All this talk about these guys being 24, he's going to be 25. And we're towards the end of that now. So we're going to start getting back to, the oldest college players will be 23 because they'll have the 1 year
Hmm.
of the injury or of the red shirt, versus having a red shirt, an injury, and a COVID season,
Correct.
to where you can essentially be in college for 7 years. Because that's Dylan Gabriel. I think he was at UCF for 4, so I think it's his 6th year of college, if I recall correctly, because he had the COVID year and he had an injury, and then he played the 1 year at Oklahoma, and then the gonna have this year at Oregon. So
And I tend to agree with you. It's funny because if you would have said, 10 years ago we were going to be where we are today, I think we
Mhm.
both would have potentially said no, and we might have even thought it was crazy. So that's kind of why I posed the question. But will we see major high school sports move towards more of an academy type of model, i.e., the school we keep bringing up, IMG Academy, or maybe a European soccer club team format?
So I don't think you'll see sports go more towards the academy because sure you may have some pop up here and there, but overall, to get the funding to do that, to create a school, to build a school, to fund it, that's a lot of money,
Yeah,
and we take for granted, with public schools, it's taxpayer funded. If it's an academy like that, it's not.
yeah,
So you have to have a lot of donors, and the thing is, if it's not a school that's existing, you don't have alumni to donate, right? So you'd have to start a new school from scratch. You'd have to find coaching staff, get kids to buy in to go. But then you also need kids that don't play sports and have a benefit for them to be there too, right? So I don't really see that in terms of the club. In a way, yes.
mhm,
However, where it's different is the European clubs, the professional organizations own those clubs, right?
correct. Yeah,
Um, so it is a little bit different. And I think what's tough is for some sports I could see it, but you kind of already have it. Like with basketball, you have, you already have that kind of feel to it,
yeah,
right? You already have a U18 national team and things like that. So I don't know if I see it because football's too difficult because a kid could be great at 10, but
mhm,
his body may not end up translating to that position that he was playing, right? He could be big. Man, I remember when I was younger, I played with a kid. I played basketball with him. And this kid had cans as calves in fourth grade, dude. He
mhm,
was chiseled in fourth grade. Seriously. He
yeah,
was more athletic than everybody. You're like, dude, star running back. He was he wasn't a great basketball player, but he was super athletic, which helps. And so you're like, dude, this guy's a freak athlete. Man, we get to high school, 5'7",
yeah,
160 pounds, still put together well, but nothing physically he wasn't special anymore.
hmm,
He was like our fourth string, third, fourth string running back, you know, like a cool guy, man, but he wasn't, he wasn't going to make it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
said. And so I think with football, it would be extremely difficult. And again, with other sports, basketball, baseball, travel ball, again, you already have that. Kids that play baseball they're playing baseball year round.
yes,
Like these guys that make it to the major leagues, they're not playing for their high school team. That's it. Like they're playing 365 days a year they're playing baseball, right? Basketball, it's the same thing. They're playing year round. They're playing for their school in the I guess winter for basketball, right? Soccer, same thing. So you kind of already have this. So I don't really see the club part happening
hmm,
because baseball already has a minor league system. Basketball kind of does now with the G League. It's becoming bigger and bigger,
yeah,
right? And they're even allowing people to come out of high school, right, and go right to this instead of having to go to college. Um, So I don't foresee that happening because I don't think the professional teams are going to spend that money. Because why
mhm,
would they do that when other people are going to spend the money to get these kids to play?
correct.
What's what? Why would a business spend money when they don't have to?
Yeah, and if, I mean, the NFL has a farm system. It's called
Mhm.
college football, and
Yeah,
they don't pay a
you
dollar
got to
for
be there 3 years.
it.
You got to play 3 years.
They don't pay a dollar for it, and by the time they get these kids, they've already have their own brand, and they have a name, and translates to the NFL. I do tend to agree with that. I wanted to put that in the question because I do believe, I look at it, and one thing that I like about all of this is that we're finally starting to stop the charade that we care about athletes getting
Mhm.
educations. Like, it is what it is. We want to be entertained. We want guys to play their sport at a high level, and they're finally starting to get compensated for it.
Mhm.
So the lid has kind of been taken off the whole idea of amateur. which amateur was really just a code word used to say, hey, let's keep them at cheap labor. And when I
Mhm.
say cheap, I mean free labor, right? Um, but the idea of, I do think there's going to be more academies that's popping up, because I do think you kind of underestimate how much money is in the sport. Because you're right, the initial investment that will have to be put in when you don't have an alumni, when you're just starting it, you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
But you can gather wealthy collectives. I mean, are they going to be popping up in Iowa? Of course not. But will there be more academies in maybe California, Texas, Florida, maybe, hey, the state we're in, Georgia, which is a hotbed of football talent. A place
All
like,
sports
yeah, all
here.
sports. A place like Ohio, which has a lot of athletes. Those particular states, I could definitely see a scenario where there's more academies that are popping up, where they get, just like colleges are, they get a collective that says, hey, we want to put in this initial investment. We're going to build this place up to be the next IMG Academy, with the idea of saying, okay, once we get to a level, we'll be able to get in, endorsement dollars. We'll be able to get in, our donors coming back from who's now in the NFL. They donate back to us, and we'll get our money back in that way. But I do see a system where we start to have more academies, because when that question is kind of more posed to football, because like you're saying, like, realistically, do you know who Jordan Crawford is? Played in the NBA for a
Oh
while.
yeah, yeah.
So do you know his story? So
Went
he
to Xavier, right? That's the Jordan Crawford you're talking
didn't
about.
play high school basketball.
Mhm.
He literally just played AAU, and he admits it, that he just couldn't stay eligible. He couldn't be eligible. He never played high school basketball. He basically just played AAU, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he then went to a JC and then went to Xavier. But you
Mhm.
figure, I mean, high school for basketball is important, because
Mhm.
AAU catches the eyes. Now, my biggest fear from a football standpoint, and for the health of football, is, I'm like, please God, don't let that same thing transition over to
Mhm.
707, where 707 becomes more important than what kids are doing on Friday nights, because you can't really grade a football player until you see him getting hit with pads, right? So
Mhm.
that's my hope. But nonetheless, I can see more IMG academies popping up over the next 10 to 15 years, where it becomes more about, hey, we're going to get you kids in here. You're going to eat, sleep, and football.
Mhm.
We're gonna coach you up around that. We're gonna school you around that. But you guys are football players starting from the age of 14 and up. I could definitely see that.
So I think what would be more likely than that is these areas that are wealthier areas
Mm-hmm.
have more donors that put money into the schools that are already there
Mm.
and improve the programs that are there. I think that's more likely because, again, starting a whole school from scratch, then you have to sell that school, right? So you could have camps and things like that, sure, over summer. They already have a bunch of those, right? You maybe can have ones that are a little bit more where it's like, hey, you pay this much to go here, but guess what? We have all these sponsors that are NIL sponsors that are going to be there, coaches from different high schools, all over the country that are going to be there. Stuff like that, sure. But I do think it would be more likely that more money is poured into these, some private and some public school districts that are in the wealthier areas, where the median income is, of that school district is 200,000 or something like that, right? 150,000 a family, when that's a median. So you have outliers on both sides to where they're like, hey, I'll donate to it. And again, because the NIL can do 501c3, there is a tax benefit to
Yeah.
donate to these organizations. So I do think that will be more prevalent than whole academies, because a school as a nonprofit is not happening. This way you can donate,
Mm-hmm.
and you donate specifically to the NIL for that school, that
Yeah.
it's primarily with that school, right? Because the third parties can actually stipulate, hey, you get this paid on based on your performance,
Mm-hmm.
based on region, and they could make it doesn't say what the region has to be,
Yeah.
right? If there's one school within a 1 mile radius, they could say, hey, from this point on a map, you have a 1 mile radius. If you're in a school in this radius, you get that money, or you get to go for free, or whatever that case is. Well,
Yeah.
there's no other school in that area. So let's be real. You're basically paying them to go to that school. There are ways around the rules,
Yeah.
right? And so I do think that would be more likely, and that will probably come about in the next couple of years, probably starting as soon as August 1st when all this stuff takes effect. That's what we're going to see more than new schools popping up
Mm-hmm.
just to do that. Because at the same time, if it's a school, they have to still deal with the state for regulations with the state. There's a lot that goes into it.
There
You know
is.
what I mean? Because you still have to, if it's a school, you still have to have teachers. You still have to have all these other things. They can't just be like, hey, you go here and you play football and that's all you do. That's a
Yeah.
camp, and they can have those
Yeah.
separate. You know what I mean?
The whole thing's going to be interesting. Did you see that article I shared in regards to who's collected the most funding in college football? Their collective.
I don't think I saw it. Yeah, you
Pony
post too much, bro.
man.
Who?
SMU.
Oh yeah. No, I did see that. Yeah. Well, that's because that's twofold, right?
Number 2, by the way, Nebraska.
Yeah. So here's why SMU is number one. It's twofold. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
it's a private school, right?
Yeah.
They have a lot of wealthy individuals that have gone
Boy.
there. Number two, yes. Number two is the deal they signed with the ACC. They get no ACC revenue sharing for like 8 years or something like that.
Oh wow, is it
So
that long?
it's something like that. 5 years, 6 years, something. Whatever their current ACC. Hold on. Yeah, the ACC deal is till 2036. So I think it's the first 8 years or something like that. They get no revenue from the ACC deal, and the ACC deal, I wrote this down, is $240 million a year.
Oh.
The ACC gets the media rights. That's just the ACC, by the way. That this is not NCAA. This is ACC's contract it's for all their sports. But let's be real, the biggest piece of that pie goes to football.
Yeah.
With the 240 million, there's now going to be 16 teams in the ACC.
Yeah.
So 240 million a year split evenly amongst the 16 teams. Okay, so if you do the math, that's 15 million a year. That's 15 million a year SMU is not getting from the ACC media rights deal for the next, I think it's 8 years, but it might be shorter. You're right. But that's why they had to come up with that money. 15 million a year over 8 years is $100 million.
Yeah.
So they have to come up with that money to be able to compete.
Oh, they did. They came
Right.
up with
And they will compete now because they were actually pretty good in they were in the American Conference, I think. They were pretty good. Now they're in the ACC, a bigger conference, guaranteed spot in the playoffs on the line.
Yes. Yes.
It's going to be interesting.
There's a couple of areas that were not natural powerhouses or that are old powerhouses that I think if they get the right collectives. So the old powerhouses, SMU in Nebraska, if they get a good collective, and it looks like they have, you're going to start seeing a lot of movement. I mean, you've seen how Nebraska's recruited lately. And even though the quarterback, I mean, I'm sure they gave him a pretty penny, but he's legacy. His dad was, I believe, an All-American guard at Nebraska. Played
very good pro.
Very good pro for Lions. And then, but two schools that I tell you, because I think are they also in the ACC?
I'd have to double check.
If Memphis is if they're in one of the Power 5 conferences, I feel like they did. But if they are, Memphis is a hotbed of talent, of high school talent. If they can keep the kids in Memphis, if they got a good collective, Memphis will become a powerhouse. Another school, Houston, because there's a lot of good kids in Houston. Obviously, they find their way in.
They're in the Big 12 now.
Who is Houston?
Houston's in the Big 12 now. Last year, and look at their basketball team already won the conference.
Watch what happens with them in the next 5 to 7 years if they have a good collective. People are going to be surprised. Like, where did Houston come from?
Memphis isn't Power 5 or Power 4.
I know, right? Yeah. So, I guess Power 4, right?
Yeah.
But, okay. This is an interesting question because it has layers, but will NIL cause college football to rise, decline, or stay steady?
College football specifically
College football
or college
specific.
sports?
Let's be honest. College football is the main sport that we care about.
No. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason I ask, right? It's
Because I'm glad you asked it that way because there's a
Mhm.
second component to it, and you'll see where I'm going with this. So, but
Okay.
but let's stick on this first.
I think it's going to help it rise because I think you're going to get more kids that will stay for the full 4 years of eligibility than come out early. Because if you're not a guaranteed top 10 pick, uh, you could potentially get more money in an NIL deal than you will in your rookie contract in terms of per year, right? Now, of course, there is with the rookie contract, it's 4 years guaranteed with a fifth year option, but the 4 years is guaranteed money. But for instance, Brock Bowers was the 13th pick, right? I think for the Raiders, and his contract I think was 4 years, and I think it was like around 20 million
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed. So if you think about that, that's about 5 million a year. But he was the 13th pick.
Yeah.
So if you're not guaranteed, how many juniors come out, right? If you can make $1-2 million a year and play a senior year,
Mm-hmm.
I think you have that extra, you have that extra incentive. So I do think it's actually going to help it. I don't think at all it hurts it. Um, the one thing that can make it interesting is that schools and NCAA athletes in general are starting to discuss unionization
Yes.
to get profit sharing, right? Or revenue sharing, I guess technically is what it's called with the NCAA. If that happens, and it's going through the court process now. So we'll see where it goes because Dartmouth, I think, was the first one they brought it to courts and it passed the first level, right? So we're probably a couple years away before it goes to the Supreme Court. Really,
Yeah.
we know if it's gonna stick or not. If they unionize and they get revenue sharing, that's going to change a lot. That's going to change a lot, but it's going to be different too because what a lot of people don't realize is in the NCAA revenue, the NCAA gets no money from college football,
Correct.
none.
Yeah.
So the NCAA's revenue, college football is its own entity.
Mm-hmm.
So the unionization against the NCAA is not going to affect college football revenue because college football gets no revenue from the NCAA. They get their own. The
They're just
college football,
yeah.
what?
They're just a governing body.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if they unionize against college football process, you know how much the college football playoff media rights deal is?
How much?
So it's a 6-year deal that just went into effect. It goes into effect this year. Just the renewal starts this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's $1.3 billion a year with ESPN.
Oof.
Okay. Starting this year now with the 12-team playoff, there will be 11 games total. Okay, because the top 4 get a bye. So the first round, there's going to be 4 games. Then there's going to be 8 teams. Second round, 4 games. Then the semifinals. Then the final, right? 11 games. That's over $100 million a game that college football gets. Now, they do share it based on, it goes to the conference.
Yeah.
And that's why you see conferences doing this conference attack. And that's football that spears it. And that's why you have now 4 conferences. Because conferences like the SEC that have been sending 2 teams of college football playoff, they get half the revenue, whatever revenue share that the conferences get, they get half of it, right? So I do think it overall it helps. I really do, but I do think there does need to be more rules to it
Mm-hmm.
because right now the rules are very vague and it's different from state to state. It's different from conference to conference. And I think they do need to make it to where they have the same rules because you have to me, you have to limit it. You know what I mean? Or you're going to have where you have 4 or 5 teams every year, which you already have that without NIL. So now if you say, well, you can do whatever money you want,
Mm-hmm.
teams like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, right? These schools, okay, well, we're already legacy. We already are elite. We're already a funnel to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can give you more money than anybody else can. You're going to have the same teams every single year winning the title. and it's going to make it's going to water college football down a lot because you're going to have some players that'll be like, look, I could potentially make the NFL, but guess what? I can grab $1 million right now to go sit on the bench at Alabama. I'll just take it. Right. And you're going to get players that playing time is not their priority, making money is, that they're going to take deals to go somewhere else and not play. And I think you're going to water down the water down college football overall. The top teams are going to be fun to watch play each other
Mm-hmm.
because the talent, it will honestly be close to an NFL game in terms of the talent that you see. Right. But then when they play teams that don't have the resources or the funding, I mean, it's going to make the regular season really just not enjoyable at all.
So is that's I do think I'm conflicted with my answer because I do think that the star power, believe it or not, can rise.
Mm-hmm.
But the sport itself, I would say, actually, I do tend to believe that I don't know if it's my hope that it rises because I can see two different formats. My hope and my if I was a betting man, I would say rise. But what I fear is that what Pat Riley used to call the disease of more, right? And he talked about like when a basketball team wins a championship, now everybody's got a ring, and now, the sixth man is no longer happy in his role. Now he's like, well, I've already won a ring. I can go to another team and be
Mm-hmm.
the star and make more money. And it becomes harder to keep a group together because now that everybody's accomplished that goal, now the disease of more kicks in. And then people almost start to kind of combat against each other. College football is at a place right now because it's a different sport already, even before
Mm-hmm.
the NIL, but the NIL is helping to usher it along. So the pros and cons of it basically is college football for the longest time was a regional sport. It is not a regional sport anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And Cal and Stanford is in the ACC, USC and UCLA is in the Big Ten. It is no longer a regional sport. It used to be a regional sport that had a feel to every conference.
But that's college sports in general, right?
Yeah,
Not even just college football.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But college football was kind of the spearhead of all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, every region had its own feel. You could just turn the game on, and you can just you could see what offenses are being run, even if you couldn't see the uniforms, and you knew
Mm-hmm.
what region or what conference it usually was. Now everything's pretty convoluted, and it's all kind of a clear canvas where everything kind of looks and sounds and smells the same, right? Um, but one thing I would say is this: the competition level, college football has never been a sport where it was like, hey, anybody could win. It's
Mm-hmm.
always been a sport where it's like the cream of the crop is the only ones who have a chance. And you were either a powerhouse or you were somewhere in the middle or you were a bottom feeder. And that's just the history of college football. I think that has an opportunity to change. If these collectives start popping up around wealthier places, and it ties into a lot of politics, it ties into how the economy changes, things of that nature. But we can see, I think it's the opposite. I think we do see an opportunity. I don't think we see guys who are like, well, I'm willing to be the third or fourth string running back at Alabama for $1 million, because I think the want to play and show yourself as ready for the next level would supersede someone from taking, say, $300,000 more right now than they would another opportunity where it's like, hey, like for a running back, for example, hey, you can be the third string running back at Alabama, or you could be I'll think of a program that's a good program, but obviously not on the tier of Alabama. Let's say those
Kentucky.
I'll say, huh?
Kentucky.
Yeah, I was literally about to say Kentucky too. So,
8-4 every year. Solid, but not great.
hey, you have to take 300K less, but you're going to be our bell cow, right? You're going to get 25 carries, catches and carries between them. You're going to get 25, 30 touches a game. I think kids, especially kids who are like, if you're a real athlete, you're not in this just for the money.
Mhm.
you're going to want to go to the place where you can be the star. You're going to want to go to the place where you can show your talent. So I do think what's going to happen is I do think instead of Alabama, Georgia, a Florida, even though they're not really on top right now, but a USC, these top end programs, I think they're not going to have as much depth because you can just see from the transfer portal now, if a quarterback's not starting his first year, he's out. He's gone. I mean, the only kid I could think of who was a 5-star quarterback who stuck around and waited his turn recently was Carson Beck, and it's paid off big time for him. I mean, he might very well be the first pick in the draft next year out of
Yeah.
Georgia. Most of these
He'll be
kids,
top. He'll be top 5. It
oh,
depends. Yeah, who gets the pick. Yeah.
baller. He's a baller. But most kids, if especially the quarterback position,
Mhm.
if they're not starting year one, and they don't have a clear cut path. Well, it's aside from Arch Manning too, but I mean he comes from money, and they have a long term plan for him. But I think most of these kids don't have parents that's going to be thinking long term.
Mhm.
Most of these kids, have working class parents who are like, "Hey, we got to get you on this field so you can show these scouts what you can do." And I don't think you're going to see so many teams that are 2, 3 deep anymore. So I
Mhm.
do think moving forward, especially now that you have is it a 12 team or 16 team playoff?
It's 12. The top 4
It's,
conference winners, the 4 main
yeah.
conferences, the winners are have a bye.
And I always get confused because I think we all know it's heading to a 16 team playoff at some point. But
I don't know, man. I think the 12-team playoff they're gonna stick with because I do think yes, for a while.
yeah,
Because now there's only 4 conferences.
yeah,
So you win your conference, the conference title game, you have a bye, right? Then pretty much all 4 of those conferences, the number 2 seed is in, and that leaves 4 additional spots. I think they have to give one to the top ranked non-power 4 school.
mhm,
So that leaves 3 additional spots for Notre Dame
mhm,
and potentially Notre Dame, right?
yeah,
Depending on how they do, and then 2 other 2 other schools, that are third in their conference. So that's
yeah,
why the talk is like, hey, SEC and Big Ten are probably going to get 3 to
probably,
4 teams,
yeah,
and the ACC, depending on the years the teams have, is 1 to 2.
yeah,
And same for the Big 12, 1 to 2, probably
yeah,
not more than that in most years. Um, you do make a good point about the transfer. However, with quarterbacks, to me, it's not as big of a deal because you only play one at a time. So unless the guy gets hurt, because what you're seeing, and you brought up Dylan Gabriel earlier, and he's a perfect example. You can play at a lesser school
hmm
and ball out
hmm
your freshman and sophomore year. And then these other schools are going to say, hey, you already have 2 years under your belt.
yeah,
All you have to do is learn a new system, but you can transfer in January and have 8 months before, 9 months before a game to learn our system and practice with us. And we can instill you and play right away because our kid just graduated and we have a freshman coming in. You can compete with this freshman, but we feel like you're going to start. You bring him at and then same thing, and then they can transfer again if they need to or whatever. So I think with those positions, it's not a big deal.
yeah,
I do think with other positions it might be, but you do have to look at how teams play. So for instance, being a Georgia fan, Georgia rotate other than offensive line because no one rotates an offensive
no,
line. Georgia rotates their guys.
oh yeah, that
Right.
front,
So if you're too deep on Georgia's front 7, you're making the NFL and you
yeah,
know it.
yes,
If you're running back at Georgia, you're making the NFL and
yeah,
you know it. Right? They Edwards and Milton both went to the NFL. Sure, were they high draft picks? No, but they're going to get the opportunity to play.
hmm
Right? And we talked about this before, it preserves your career as a running back because you're not touching the ball 400 times. And that's a pitch I can guarantee you Kirby and his staff make.
hmm
Hey, you come here, are you going to get 500 touches and 2,000 yards? No.
no,
But you know what you will do? You'll be on national TV every week.
hmm
You're going to play for a championship every year, and you're going to play on Sundays.
yeah. I
And when you get there, you will be healthier than the other guy.
Yeah, and there. So but that's we're talking about like there's probably 3 programs right now who can have that pitch, which is
Mhm.
Alabama,
Georgia and Ohio State.
and Ohio State. Those are the 3
Mhm.
programs who can make that pitch. I think the rest of them, and I think the 16 team playoff. This is why I think it will.
12.
No. What I'm saying, but I'm saying I think
Oh,
we
okay.
get 16 team playoff for this reason. NIL, I don't believe, is the thing that could kill college football or could even make it decline.
Mhm.
But the thing that can is and I believe me and you have talked about this before, or I may have talked about it with some other people. I definitely spoken about it before. But the thing that used to really make college football is the sneaky thing was it was that pro sports, it matters who wins it all. For a long time, honestly, college football, it wasn't whoever won the national championship, that wasn't the end all be all. What it used to be is if your school, okay, we've used like Cal and Stanford, because they went to the ACC and us being, original California guys. A good season used to be Stanford or Cal or the vast majority of the programs. A good season wasn't we won the national championship, we did it. A good season was, man, Stanford went 11-2 and won the Rose Bowl. And
Mhm.
that was their national championship. And they can go out and they can recruit on the fact that, hey, we won 11 games. We're a top end program. We won the Rose Bowl last year. Everybody's seen the Rose Bowl because it was a big deal. It was the granddaddy of them all, right? Whereas the deterioration of the bowls, of bowls used to matter. You remember this us growing up, is you would starting about the day after Christmas, right? That's when the lower tier bowls came up, and then by New Year's, you're you have family over, you're eating good food, you're watching
Mhm.
all these big bowls. For some people, it was the first time they were introduced to that superstar running back, superstar receiver, quarterback, whatever it was. And these bowls had a lot of they mattered. It mattered
Mhm.
who won the Holiday Bowl. It mattered that this team won 10 games for the first time in 25 years and had two or three All-Americans. Like those things mattered. Now all we talk about is who won it all. So
Mhm.
or who made the playoffs action. So the expansion of the playoffs is going to camouflage over the fact that bowls haven't mattered for a long time. These big time kids who, they're skipping bowls. They're like, listen, I'm not playing in the Holiday Bowl. I'm going to start getting prepared for the draft. That stuff was hurting, because secretly, not even secretly, but loudly, that was the thing that made college football, because college football is about the pageantry. So if you have, now that we have a 12 playoff system, you're going to see how people really gravitate towards that system, because now instead of 4 teams having a chance, 12 teams have a chance. They're going to see, okay, if we expand this out to 16 and 16 teams have a chance, now the talent will be spread out. And now it's not going to matter that our traditional bowl system no longer matters. So I think that is the thing that's actually going to save college football. And NIL, I think will be, I'll tell you the position NIL deal I think will be the most beneficial for is running back.
Mhm. Oh
Because,
yeah.
because these kids, by the time they get to the NFL, they get burned and churned. Like,
Mhm.
like hey, your first contract, we're going to try to run you into the dirt, and then by the time you get your second contract, we're going to try to lowball you. Right? So
Yeah.
they can stay in college for 4 years, even if they have to transfer around and do things like that. Be a star running back. By the time if they play their cards right, by the time they get to the NFL, they might have a net worth already of $6 to $10 million.
Yeah.
So that'll be the benefit for those kids.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you on the running back part, especially because running backs are no longer first round commodities, right?
No,
So, Nick Chubb was the first pick of the second round,
which is
right?
crazy to think
Right.
about.
I mean, and he was like the third running back pick that year, I think, too.
Yeah,
But anyway, uh, those first contracts, if you're not a first round pick, are not millions upon millions of dollars. Most running backs, the best running backs get a second good contract.
mhm.
They don't get a third,
No,
right? You look at guys. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's, an
he's he's
outlier in
different.
that regard.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you look at Le'Veon Bell, you look at Ezekiel Elliott,
Hmm.
right? And Nick Chubb, he's in his second contract. He just got an injury. We'll see how he comes back. I think
Yeah.
he'll be fine because he's had an injury before and
Hmm.
come in college and come back. But to your point on that, you're 100% right. But I do think what you're doing right now about the playoff system is you're actually making an argument that the NIL and the playoff system is a perfect combination
It is.
because yes, the bowl games, the lower tier bowl games don't matter as much. Now, for those kids that are playing and for those schools, and the thing is though, as the playoffs expand, these kids that see these other schools, like let's say Georgia State makes a bowl game. None of those kids are playing in the NFL. I mean, very rarely, right? So the getting to a bowl game is still big for schools like that,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's a bowl game where they're 7-5 and they're playing on December 15th, it's still a big deal and they're still going to play those games. So you
Yeah.
still have that for those colleges that really are not big time colleges.
Mhm.
And then you do have the money. So I think the NIL and the playoffs together is going to allow college football to continue to grow
Yeah.
versus, uh, and I think the NCAA, I mean, they had to because it was legal, but I think they're going to be more open to it once they see what actually happens with the sport,
Mhm.
because those things working in conjunction with each other.
You know what else is going to be a unexpected benefit from NIL is that I think that at some of the the top programs, let's just say the top 15, 20 programs, you're going to see better coaching. And the reason I say that is because you're going to see more Chip Kelly going from UCLA head coach to Ohio State's offensive coordinator. Georgia State, you just mentioned Georgia State, their head coach, he resigned and went to, I believe, South Carolina to be their tight end coach. You're going to see more guys who were head coaches at other places, and is either going to come to the conclusion that we can't compete at this lower tier school monetarily, or you're going to have a lot of guys who are like, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to coach
Mm.
football. I don't want to. I don't want to have to be the CEO, COO of this entity. I just want to coach ball. And you're going to see guys. I mean, would you have ever thought you would see a head coach, especially with Chip Kelly's stature, who decides I don't want to be the head coach at UCLA. I would rather be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State.
Well, yes and no, because part of it is, dude, since Chip Kelly left Oregon, he has
Mm-hmm.
not been successful. He was not successful at Philadelphia. He had 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it was new. And then all the defensive coordinators were like, cool, now we know how to do this.
Yeah.
And then it was not, and he was trying to run an NFL team like college, and you can't do
Yeah.
it. Those they're grown men making more money than you,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right? And then at UCLA, I mean, what his best year was maybe 8-4. I mean, he didn't do good. I mean, UCLA is not a powerhouse
No.
football school, right? But they still expect better than 8-4. If that's your best year, to be honest with you, I haven't heard reports, so I don't know if this is true or not. Dude, I don't think Chip Kelly was going to be there long anyway. They may have
I,
let him play out his contract or coach
I,
out his contract, but I think this is he's using this to vault to a different school, honestly, because he's going to go to Ohio State. They're
mm-hmm.
going to have, which they would have had whether he's there or not, a top 5 offense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he'll do that for a year or two, kind of like Sark did, man. You kind of cut your losses because you failed, and you go under a head coach at
Mm-hmm.
a program that, dude, 11 and or 10-2 is a horrible season, and you go to those schools and you win, and you go 11-1 or go 12-0, you make the playoffs, whether you win or not doesn't matter. You still, your offense was great, whatever, and then you use that to springboard to another job. So I do think, yes, you will see some more of that, because you'll see them leave these schools maybe that they're not, maybe they can't compete at, or it's been 2 or 3 years now and they haven't really made a lot of movement. So they're like, you know what, I got to get out before I have no chance again. Let me go be a coordinator somewhere, rebuild my name, go somewhere else. Because now, I always thought with college sports, it was always interesting. They would give college coaches 2 to 3 years. It's like, dude, how you can't. You're changing the whole program now. But now with NIL, you
Yeah.
can in 1 year. The
Transfer
transfer portal, NIL, you can change and make that change in 1 year and turn a program around very quickly, right? And so it was like that coach at TCU, right? He turned TCU around real quick, and
Yeah.
Granted they took a step back, but I mean, turning them around from, they had won like I think 3 games, and then they went to the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he did that in 1 year because of the transfer portal mostly, and I'm sure there were some NIL deals there too. I'd have to look at it and see, but those things now have actually made it to where, yeah, now coaches have a shorter timeline to get their act together.
Mhm.
than they did before. Before, you had to give them time. You got to recruit guys that fit your system. Now you got the transfer portal, you got NIL, easier to recruit in that sense because you can pay guys, you
Mhm.
can incentivize players monetarily.
So I had a few more. I had two more questions, but I'm gonna, for time, I'm going to move to the last question because I think in this is something I've been pondering for for a while now, actually. So, will NIL make it easier for NFL teams to draft players who are less likely to be a bust?
Will NIL make it easier for NFL?
So,
No,
will it make it easier when scouting, and less likely that you end up drafting a bust?
no. Conversely, I think it makes it more likely.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah,
be,
I want to hear it.
because to your point, these kids can go play somewhere else and get playing time and make money. And sure, they may make a little bit less, but they're playing a lesser program. They're playing against lesser talent.
Mhm,
Their numbers are going to be inflated because they're playing right away instead of playing with better talent.
mhm,
Um, I definitely don't think it makes it less likely in any case because you look at some of these guys that were busts, right? I mean, Jamarcus Russell is one of the biggest busts in NFL. It's probably the biggest, right? At least that I can think of in the last 20 years.
why I go the other way. But go ahead.
Okay. But you're telling me if he was at LSU, he wasn't getting NIL deals, making money? I know what you're gonna say, and you're gonna say, well, if the kid's making money, then he might not perform because he's already making the money. And so he's not going to have. You're going to really see their true work ethic, which is a good is going to be a valid point as well. And I can definitely see that. But I don't think overall it's going to make it any less likely because at the end of the day, you know, first of all, the emphasis on drafting a quarterback has been so high. Not every quarterback is going to be it, man. Not every draft has a Hall of Fame quarterback in it. Not every draft is going to have 3 or 4 first round worthy quarterbacks like we saw in this last draft.
Mhm,
Bo Nix got drafted 12th, but he was the 6th quarterback taken,
mhm,
right? So if he doesn't do well, is he a bust? He's considered a bust because he's a first rounder, but he was the 6th quarterback taken or
mhm,
5th quarterback taken.
mhm,
So if he's the 5th best quarterback in that draft, but he's not worth a first round pick, he's considered a bust,
mhm.
right? But that's more on the team because the team reached for a need. So I still think you're going to have that issue. You're going to have that issue anyway. You know what I mean? You It's going to happen because you're still going to see these players. Like I remember growing up in Southern California, Mike Williams, wide receiver USC, bro.
Monster.
If you told me that man was going to have the NFL career he did, I'd slap you in the face
Yeah,
unless you told me he was injured, right?
yeah,
I'd say, dude, this guy is going to be a Hall of Famer, or at the very least, a Hall of Very Good.
yeah,
He would catch everything. He
yeah.
had the body. I mean, and let's be real. Like I was on the board of. I don't think Matt Leinert's that great of a quarterback. When he got drafted, I was like, I could see him going either way.
Yeah, I thought
Mike
he
Williams, I was
was
like, Mike Williams was a shoo-in, dude.
yeah.
That guy is going to be a legit number one wide receiver. That guy was a bust. To me, there's no exact science with football, man. There's too many variables with football to where you can point at one thing like NIL and say, hey, this is going to make it less or more likely. I just I don't see it. I don't see it making it any easier because NFL teams are still going to recruit based on need or recruit draft based on need.
Mhm.
That to me is on the front office. And as long as the pressure is on those guys to win now, which it always is,
Yeah,
and when you don't have guys at positions that you need to win, you don't have that star edge rusher. You look at Chase Young, dude. I, Good dude. Watch him in college.
he,
That guy was better than the Bosa brothers in college. Look
he
at him
was
in the NFL.
he was. Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I mean, come on, man. So to me, and again, Chase Young, if there's NIL, dude, that guy's getting paid. Look at
yeah,
him, man. That
yeah,
guy is a football player. and he gets on the football field, and you're like, bro, what, Vernon Golston, right? Remember him?
Yeah.
Jets drafted him, DN from Ohio State too.
Hmm.
Yeah, to me, no, I don't think you can point to NIL for that.
But so there's a twofold here because you did make me think of something that's interesting. Is that um, is I think a lot of the bus. So this will eliminate one thing. Is it will allow you to see what a kid is going, how a kid is going to carry itself as a professional, because I think we both agree that
The money.
they're no longer amateurs. Like you're
Mm,
basically by your senior year of high school, if you're a 5-star, high end 4-star, you're carrying yourself like a professional at that point because you're starting to be monetized for what you're doing. That does take away the factor. I mean, I can't remember, especially growing up, I can't remember how many guys got drafted, and you can tell that once they signed that big contract, it was just like, oh, okay, the journey's over now. It wasn't about, okay, but the journey's just started. And
mm-hmm,
especially with quarterbacks, Jamarcus Russell's a perfect example. Jamarcus Russell, and to a lesser term, Vince Young too. Although I do tend to aim more of Vince Young's issues, where I do believe if he goes to a team that's not coached by Jeff Fisher, I really believe 9 times out of 10 his career is totally different.
mm,
Even though I wasn't the biggest Vince Young fan, if I'm being honest with you, um, which there can be somebody who's going to probably comment what, but I'll explain that. That's another topic for another day. Um, but um, it does eliminate the factor of how is this kid going to carry himself? How is this kid going to um, be once he achieves some money?
mm-hmm.
That takes that factor away. Now, a lot of the things you talked about is I truly believe some of these GMs know, hey, we're going to draft this quarterback and we really don't know if he's going to be any good. But I know if I draft a quarterback in the first round, that's going to restart my clock.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me some of these GMs don't think like that, where it's like, hey, we don't know if this kid's going to be good, but we know if we draft him in the first round, our clock gets restarted and we're going to be getting paid for the next 3 years at least. I
Right.
truly believe a lot of these is job preservation.
Mm-hmm.
But it will also do this too, is because kids will get to move around with NIL deals, because the NIL deal and the transfer portal, you will get to see some kids who otherwise wouldn't got a chance to play and get more tape that scouts can evaluate him with.
Mm-hmm.
So now, mind you, I just said easier. So even if it's in increments of 5%, even if it's 10%, even if it's 1%, I do think it is going to make it easier for scouts and easier for NFL teams to not draft as many busts. So maybe instead of 4 busts in the first round of quarterbacks, now we're at 3. They're still going to be, because there's still factors you can't eliminate totally. But I do think it's going to be
Yeah.
easy. I think this is going to make it better.
Well, your point I think doesn't have to do with first round busts. I think it has to do with I think you'll see better drafting later in rounds.
Good point.
And
Good.
you won't be picking as blind based on this guy has the measurables, but his
Mhm.
game tape's limited, so we're going to take a shot.
Yeah.
I think that the second to fourth, fifth round, that's where you're then going to see probably better picks for better depth,
Hmm.
and you'll probably see less quality free agent rookies, seventh round picks, because those guys now are getting drafted sooner because of the tape. Again, with the first round picks, name a first round pick that there wasn't game tape on. Trey Lance is a 49er fan, is one guy,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not going to lie to you. If there's one coach or one of a handful of coaches that I would say, hey, I want him to handpick his own quarterback, Kyle Shanahan would be one.
Yeah.
And I'm sure John Lynch felt the same way.
Yeah.
And you have to think, I don't know their whole dynamic. I don't know. You would probably know more about this than me, but I would think that they had a lot of discussions.
Mhm.
And Kyle Shanahan's like, yeah, this kid's going to fit my system. I want him. And John Lynch is on board, right? I feel like they would have to be on the same page with that. But for the most part, you don't get Carson Wentz as another one, right? And Carson Wentz actually started really well until he got injuries. Always turnover prone. Maybe it was just that 1 year was a fluke that he was really good. I don't know. Who knows? But to me, quarterback's also different because, to your point, teams kind of reach. They try to get quarterbacks when they don't necessarily have to. You don't see as many busts on other positions as frequently. Offensive line tends to be a very, very safe bet. There's not a whole lot of bust offensive linemen. The only one I can think of in recent history is Leatherwood for the Raiders. Love it. Love when the Raiders screw up draft picks. Where they drafted him, and everyone at the time was like, what are you doing drafting him in the first round?
Yeah.
And they cut him like 2 years later after Gruden ruined that franchise.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest mistakes they made. That getting out from under him saying those racial comments was probably the best thing that happened to the Raiders in the last 5 years. But yeah, I do think it's going to affect more of the mid rounds, that there's going to be better drafting because there's going to be more footage on guys than there is going to be on, in terms of first round busts. And NFL teams, a lot of them, the better organizations anyway, have done a better job of drafting players and changing system to players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of the Ravens. The Ravens are a great franchise.
Yeah.
And whether it's, obviously Jim Harbaugh has a lot to do with this, but drafting Lamar Jackson, him and Joe Flacco are literally the most opposite quarterbacks you can get.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Flacco, even when he was young, had his feet in cement.
Oh, yeah.
But had a big arm. Lamar Jackson is better when he's moving.
Mm-hmm.
They completely reorganized the offense. Now, they couldn't in the first season Lamar started because he came in the middle of the season to start, right?
Yeah.
After that offseason, and then he wins the MVP because they said, look, we drafted this guy because we see talent, but we need to make sure he's in the right system. And that's kind of a different conversation. But that's how I feel about Jaden Daniels. Is Washington going to do the same? Mm-hmm. Is Washington going to try and force him to be a quarterback that he's not, or are they going to let him play how he plays?
Mm-hmm.
And how he does and how well he does in the NFL is going to be dependent on that.
Mm-hmm.
To your point for the Vince Young conversation as well, the one thing that's weird about that is Jeff Fisher coached Steve McNair. Now, Steve McNair, I think, was obviously a better quarterback than Vince Young, but Steve McNair was an athlete.
Yeah.
He was a very good runner. He wasn't as big as Vince Young.
Steve McNair was huge. He wasn't.
But that's what I mean. Like Vince Young physically fit a more prototypical quarterback at that time.
Yeah,
just with speed. But anyway, yeah, I do think it's an interesting one. But I don't think overall NIL is going to affect the NFL drafting as much. I think it will affect players that are not going to be first round picks staying. That are you're not. You're not a top 15 pick, staying an extra year. And so I think it's going to make college football actually better because you're going to have, whether they transfer, to your point, they could transfer and go somewhere else, right? And play that extra year. But I think it's going to give college football actually more of a boost than it will the NFL. I don't think it's going to affect the NFL all that much.
We'll see. I truly do believe it's going to help the process of evaluating quarterbacks. Now, we really, really won't know for another full cycle because we need to get all these COVID quarterbacks out, all these 24, 25, 26-year-old quarterbacks. And then
2 more years.
Once we get a new cycle of quarterbacks coming in where to them, they grew up with NIL. Once we get the kids who, NIL has been a thing since they were in junior high. And we get these kids cycling through. But it does take away the element of how is this kid going to take his craft once he has, is this going to be the type of kid who, now that he has money, now he just wants to smoke weed and have a whole bunch of women and pop out kids. These are all factors that these scouts have to think about. These scouts, they know the kids who loves to have 5 or 6 girlfriends. They know the kids who wants to smoke weed all the time. They know this stuff. And they will know the kids who it's like, okay, well, he's been making $3 million a year since he was a senior in high school, and he's still working his butt off. He's still doing
Mhm.
the Manning Academy. He's still part of his community. He's still working his butt off and watching tape, and his coaches say that he's not giving him any issues. That process is going to make it a lot easier, and hopefully we do, because if we get more quarterbacks who are less quarterback bust, makes for a better product in the NFL. I hate,
Absolutely.
because I was a defensive player, but the truth of the matter is, if you have better quarterback play, your league prospers. That's why they
Yeah.
changed the rules.
Absolutely. But I will say also on that, in terms of their professionalism, social media has changed that a lot too.
Yes, yeah,
You know what I mean? And so the more social media has become, so those, a lot of those things you'd find out, the girlfriend thing, come on, bro. You were a high school athlete.
yeah,
The high school athletes that you knew were going places, whether they had money or not,
yeah,
had girls all over them. But not all girls were like that. I'm not saying that,
yeah,
but they always had women follow money, and they could smell that the money was going to be there,
yeah,
regardless. So you still had these issues. Weed is cheap. Come on, man. A lot of these kids are probably doing that anyway.
yeah,
And again, same thing. Hey, man, I got some weed. You're famous. I know you're going places. Hey, remember I used to hook you up, right? So you're still going to get stuff like that. You still have already had that, and now with social media, I think that's also shown a lot of the maturity with players too. Money is different, because when you have money and social media, then you get stuff like, for instance, John Morant showing his maturity issues, right, with the stuff he did. He probably acted like that before. It's just
yeah,
now he's got money, and now he can post something like that on social media, where before, if he didn't have the followers he had and he did that, just his dad's getting mad at him. You know what I'm saying? So I do see what you're saying. The professionalism part, it will weed out some of those type of players. Um, but overall, again, I really don't think it's going to have a massive impact on the NFL. Except again, it probably will make a better product, because overall, through the 7 rounds of the draft, I think you're going to draft higher quality players that
mhm,
actually have the playing time in the film, and you're going to have some players, especially at other positions, not like quarterback, that go to other schools, that are not top schools, that do play, that are very high quality. So it'll be interesting, but yeah, it's going to be a few years before we really see the full effects on it.
yeah.
Um, I think it affects other sports more than it affects football, in all honesty.
Which sport would you say specifically?
Basketball.
I
So,
think women's basketball.
well, basketball in general. So here's another. NCAA's revenue was $1.3 billion last year.
Hmm.
945 million of that is from TV.
Hmm.
771 million of that 945 is men's basketball tournament.
March
Okay.
Madness.
So look, I get women's basketball's growing.
Yeah.
It doubled in viewership. We'll see what happens this year, because Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are no longer playing, and they were very popular, the most popular women's basketball players last year. They're still popular girls. Don't get me wrong. I'm not
Age
saying
too.
listen,
Mm-hmm.
but so we'll see this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's just like with the WNBA. We have to see, is it just because Caitlin Clark's new, or is this going to stick around? But 115 million was ESPN's revenue to NCAA. A lot of that was women's basketball, but it was 21 women's sports, 19 men's sports overall to make up that other 115 million revenue. So men's basketball is still way more money, and it's not even close,
No,
right?
I agree with that.
But
Yeah.
this is where NIL, I think, affects it more. Women don't make money in pro basketball compared to men. I mean, they make money, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Men, the reason men's college basketball has seemingly had popularity decline is the best players play 1 year and go to the NBA. Well,
Yeah.
now you can pay these guys to stick around. And that's going to make a difference, because you can pay these basketball players to stick around, because there's still money to be made in men's basketball. It's the top betting. The men's tournament is the top sports gambling event in the world, or in the US, the world,
This.
but in the US. So there's a lot of money to be made. People make money, right?
Yeah.
You have to think of it this way.
Yeah.
Not everyone has good intentions. So I do think men's college basketball is going to make a bigger difference because women's college basketball, they stay for 4 years anyway. And now there's more incentive for them to do so. But look, Caitlin Clark stayed 4 years. Even
Yeah.
if there wasn't NIL, she would have, because look at her contract. She's making $80,000 a year.
Yeah.
She was living for free,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
free education, all that kind of stuff. So men's basketball, I think, is where it makes the biggest impact. NIL in terms of the college sport, in terms of keeping people there longer, and then actually, because of that, a byproduct is improving the NBA game, because now players are more polished by the time they get to the NBA. Because a lot of these guys that come out after 1 year, they're not great defensive players and they're not great shooters.
No.
They're freakish athletes, a lot of them, and they have one or two skills. This will allow them to round out their game more by the time they get to the NBA, and I think it makes the overall game better. Because right now, if you look, the best players that play right away in the NBA are European. The
Yeah.
European players that come here are better quicker than the college players. Like, look at Anthony Edwards. He
Yeah.
was good as a rookie,
Yeah.
but it took him 4 years to get going. Luka was all pro in his second year because
Yeah.
he played pro overseas.
So I get what you're saying conceptually, and I would hope that would be what happened. But the reason I brought up women as opposed to men is because women, you have to be there 4 years, and I do think I there's been a shift. So men's college basketball is going to make its money. Let's be honest. College basketball, men's basketball is going to make its money because they don't have to have stars anymore, because March Madness is going to bring out all the degenerate gamblers. So they're going to make their money regardless, and it's going to be a big spectacle regardless. But what it's not going to do is not going to bring more stars back to college basketball, because in basketball is different from the NFL in this standpoint. In basketball, everybody's trying to hurry up and get to the second contract. So they're trying to hurry up and get that time clock started. In college football, you can start paying guys, and in a lot of positions, like we said, running backs, a lot of other positions, they can get paid comparable while still being a star and doing all these other different things. In basketball, guys are they want to get that time clock started as soon as possible, because their whole goal is second contract, because there's such a distinct difference between first contract and second contract. They want to hurry up and get that time clock started. Let me hurry up and get to the NBA, get those years up so I can get to the second contract. Now, granted, the vast majority of them aren't going to make it to the second contract. Half of them are. But they all in their head think they are, and they're all trying to hurry up and get to that second contract. In college basketball, I mean, can you name 5 guys from college basketball? I can't name 5 guys.
Zach Edey, Clint. I could probably name 5 guys if I thought about
No.
it. That's my point. Is you're going to have these other people, these third party NILs, the coaches, telling them, "Hey, you could make money now because you're banking on." Right, like Zach Edey came back. He was college player of the year as a junior.
Yeah.
Came back because he was graded as a second round pick, because his game doesn't fit the NBA now.
Yeah.
Now he's graded as they're talking about him going like around 15. He didn't improve his game at all, which I mean, he didn't really need to. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, what he does, he's very good at.
Yeah.
If he played 30 years ago, he'd be the number 1 pick.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the game's played different now. But he's still a rim protector.
Mm-hmm.
His jump shot's not terrible.
No.
So he can still play. He's going to play in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
But my point is, these other guys that you can sit there and look at them and say, hey, man, like, his second round pick in the NBA is not even a guaranteed contract.
No.
Okay. So if you're not guaranteed to be a top 30 pick, you come back, you make more money, and you're going to have more people, more guys, I think, stay because they can guarantee money. Because if they go to that, to your point, it's a second contract. That's only if you're a first round pick. Because if you're a second round pick, it's a 2-year contract.
Yeah.
So 2-year contract, that second pick, is a minimum, right? Yeah. You're $1.5 million a year. So you could be a star in college and make money. Zach Edey the only reason he couldn't make money NIL because he was Canadian, and Canada didn't allow it or something. Yeah. It was something with that. He couldn't make any money. If he was American, he would have made $2-3 million last year.
Yeah.
right? I mean, he led Purdue all the way to the championship. That's how good that guy was,
Yeah.
right? College Player of the Year again. He was dominant. He even dominated in that game against a guy Klingon who's going to be a top 5 pick.
Might be the first pick.
No, it's going to be a European guy.
Well,
If the Hawks draft him first, look,
he's getting some
get out
buzz.
of here.
He's getting some buzz, but it's but see, Eddie's different just because I don't
It's
really
a different position. The game's
well,
different now.
not just that, but what I'm saying is going from junior year to senior year, I don't think he improved his stock. I think he landed in a terrible draft. And this is a guy I hope the Lakers take him.
I think it's actually a twofold because he did improve his stock as well because he did actually attempt more jump shots.
Mm-hmm.
He did that on purpose, and like I said, he's not bad.
Yeah,
his jump shot form, like, he's a very good free throw shooter.
Yeah,
his jump shot form is actually not terrible. And he doesn't really have to jump much because he's so tall. So it's kind of like almost like more like a Magic Johnson set shot. But
yeah,
he's not terrible. Now, do you want him doing that all the time? No. But look at Rudy Gobert, right? Rudy
yeah.
Gobert can't even throw a hook shot in the basket, man.
No, but he's a heck of a
not that right.
Yeah.
But he can set picks and roll the basket. Eddie can do that. But the thing is, Eddie can set a pick and sit there at the 15-foot mark and hit a jump shot. He's not going to necessarily clog the lane as much as Gobert will. And then on defense, now he's not Rudy Gobert defensively. I'm not going to say he's 4-time defensive player of the year, but he can protect the rim. But again, it's not even just him. It's those guys that, like Connecticut's other guy, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's their wing and he's their best player in terms of projection for the NBA because Klingon's a rim protector, not much of an offensive player at this point, hoping to develop. But their wing player is projected to be a top 10 pick too.
Yeah.
But he's in a position where if, as NIL gets more into college, it might, if he wasn't a top 10, if he was like, hey, you're projected to go 20 to 30, he might stay another year. You know what I mean? He might stay another year and make some money, right? And let me get paid $1.3 million instead of signing that contract that's paying me $1.4 million. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's going to be different, but I don't think it affects women's basketball at all because they're staying 4 years anyway. So to me, it doesn't affect it.
Well,
it's just it affects the players and it helps them, and that's good. Profile. That's a positive. But but they were already doing that anyway. They were already look, man, the league is pushing. The league or whoever it is, ESPN is pushing women's basketball down your throat.
Yeah.
Like it is, it honestly, it gets kind of obnoxious. Like I'm sick of seeing commercials for it. But it's like, okay, I get it. But like, why am I seeing more of this than anything else? They're pushing it down your throat. The WNBA has doubled in revenue. It's almost like 200% in terms of their attendance, their sales, everything on their store. They're still predicted to lose 50 million this year. It's not profitable. The NBA is subsidizing the WNBA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they do. It's just not profitable. It's not because people are not watching it at the same way. Because even though there's more people going, I don't know, what's the ticket to a WNBA game? It's not the same as going to an NBA game.
No.
And they can't charge that because then their attendance will drop again.
Yeah.
So it's good that these players can make the money in college because they're not making it in the pros. And they really can't because there's no money to give them.
I do think the profile, because they can't leave. They can't leave early. Like Juju's next up, her and Paige, but Juju is like,
oh, Juju's in, man.
She's going to be nasty. And it's crazy that she has to be in college for 3 more years. Like,
yeah, but at the same time, that's better for her. She's going to make more money over the next 4 years than she will in her first 10 years in the WNBA.
Hey, maybe
contractual wise,
maybe Ice Cube throws her a big 3 contract offer.
He probably will. I would take it.
Yeah, I hope.
I'd do both. Can I do the big 3 in the WNBA?
Yeah, I mean, do you think the WNBA is going to say no? You can't play here because you're playing over there. Of course, they would. They would have done the same with Caitlin Clark. That's why I don't know why she didn't take that deal.
Because I don't think she's in it for the money. And I don't know the season of Big 3. I don't know exactly when it is because it's not during NBA.
It's right before.
So that contradicts with the WNBA season.
Yeah,
so she might not be able to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I mean, it'll be interesting. I would love for college basketball to, because like I said, I can't name 5 returning players for next season. I just can't.
Mhm.
I can name guys who played this year, but I was thinking about it. I was like, I can't name 5 guys who's going to be back next.
Yeah, but also, how much college basketball did you watch?
Not as much as I used to because it doesn't have the same appeal that it used
Okay, so then how much women's college basketball did you watch?
to. A good amount.
See, that's my point. So if you're gonna watch it, right now, you may be like, "Hey, I'm just preferring this more now." That's
Yeah.
fine, but you're gonna know more, right?
But what brought me in? The stars.
Right, but that's my point. But how many stars can you name in the WNBA? All right, I mean in women's college basketball, they're there right now in college. 2,
Me?
Paige and Juju. Yeah,
No,
I'm asking. Huh?
I can name a few more.
Okay.
Let's see.
No, you can't.
No, listen. Florence Johnson, the point guard for LSU. Haley Vaughn. I can't remember her last name.
Okay, so you're naming the team. We get people from the teams,
No,
right?
she transferred to TCU. Let me think. We don't want to. Well, look.
So we're at 3.5, dude. Like,
I can't name any who's going to be in men's college basketball next
but
year.
you didn't watch it, is what I'm saying. You watched more. You admitted you watched more women's than men's, and you named 2.5 women or
Yeah.
3.5 women, and you named no men. So come on,
Look,
you're
I'm not
not doing a very good job of backing yourself up
football,
here.
but it's. I mean, you remember how men's college basketball used to be. I mean, it used to be maybe on the same level of college football.
Mm. Because the stars were always born in the tournament, dude. Remember, like that was the thing. Like Steph Curry had that huge tournament, and then he came back to school, and everyone's like, "What? Why would you do that? You're a star. You need to go to the NBA now, right?" Stars didn't come back to college.
See, I'm thinking
They
about
played maybe 2 years. If you're thinking back in the '80s or something like that,
nine,
bro, I mean, okay,
like Iverson played 2 years. Ray Allen
right?
played.
But it was 2 years.
And I remember when the Big East was like, you would watch Villanova and they had Kerry Kittles,
Mhm.
and you watch UConn, they had Ray Allen, you watch, Allen Iverson became my favorite basketball player watching him play at Georgetown. And that made me want to follow his whole NBA career. And it was just you had Dick Vitale, and you had the diaper dandies, and you had
Listen,
basketball, and it was the pageantry of it.
listen. '90s basketball.
Yeah.
You can't compare to any other era because that was the peak of popularity in the U.S. You know that out of the top 10 finals to be viewed,
Hmm.
6 are the Bulls.
Yeah. I mean, because Jordan,
Okay,
Jordan was the.
six. Listen, 6 are the Bulls, and
Yeah.
then you have the 3 prior to the Bulls winning with the Lakers and Pistons,
Hmm.
and the Lakers and Celtics. And then the other one is the Cavs and Warriors in 2017, the year after the Cavs came back from down 3-1. Those
Yeah.
are your top 10 finals in terms of average viewership.
Yeah.
So 90s basketball was different. It just was.
Yeah.
Basketball interest was higher. Baseball was down. They had the strike. Remember 94? NFL was the NFC was just running it. No one really cared about the Super Bowl because the NFC was just going to win. They were on a streak of like 14, 15 straight Super Bowl wins. You'd watch the NFC Championship game was the Super Bowl until
Yeah.
the Broncos finally broke through and beat the Packers. I mean, basketball, the 90s was basketball. So
Yeah.
it's hard to sit there and be like, oh, well, 90s college basketball too. Yes, it was different then. Basketball overall, the popularity was there.
Well, this is something we could talk about on another topic, but what I've noticed is I don't even think most people like sports or like athletes. I don't think they appreciate athletic achievements. I think from what I take from social media the last 10 years and from what I take from hot takes and conversations, I think people hate watch sports. I think people, no, I'm serious. I think people watch sports not to say, I want to see something spectacular, a spectacular achievement happen. I want to see a 360 dunk. I want to see a 3-point shot I've never seen before. I want to see a long touchdown. It's more of, I want to talk junk about somebody at the end of the game. I want to talk about how this person messed up. I want to talk about how this person's legacy isn't as good as the other person. I think it's been overrun by nerds who aren't coordinated, and they have a bunch of hot takes, and they never did anything competitive, and they have 2 left feet, and it's more entertaining for them to say that I watch, you know, LeBron James and he's not Michael Jordan, even if they weren't even old enough to watch Michael Jordan, and he's a loser because he went to the finals 10 times and only won 4 times, as opposed to looking at all of his achievements. Or it's more entertaining to say
Mm.
Russell Westbrook is garbage because he never won a championship, instead of looking at him and saying Russell Westbrook has been a great point guard for about, I think about 13, 14 years, has, you know, a triple, has completed something that we never thought we would see, which is have a triple double season. He did, I think, 4 times in a row. More people like to hate watch and then talk junk about these
Mm.
amazing athletes than they do to watch and appreciate the achievement. And that culture, what that's done is that's seeped into everything. And it really is, and again, this is a whole nother topic because it's not NIL deal, but we'll have this conversation, I'm sure, another time. But it's the very reason why I say the most influential sports figure in the last 25 years is Skip Bayless. He has totally impacted how everybody watches sports. And it's totally changed the way people watch sports, where they don't appreciate the achievements. They would rather talk junk about what someone didn't do or what they
Mhm.
didn't do in comparison to someone else. But
Yeah.
that we're going to have that time. We're going to have that conversation another time. But yeah, so I think that about wraps it up here on this. Let me circle back on NIL.
Yeah.
I would say, you guys, hey, comment, like, subscribe, obviously, but comment about what you think the impact of NIL did. How do you feel about NIL deal? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? What is the impact on college sports? What is the impact on high school sports? And then ultimately, what will the impact be on professional sports? Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. We want your feedback. You know, we love your feedback. But either way, just enjoy the content. Again, make sure you like,
Absolutely.
comment, subscribe. Did you want to end with anything?
Yeah. I just a simple yes or no question to end it because we didn't really answer this question. So you posed it to our viewers.
Hmm.
Is NIL overall a good or bad thing? Yes or no? Good or bad?
Yes.
Yes. Good.
Hmm.
Perfect. I agree. I agree. I think it does need some tweaking. I do think they
Yeah.
need to make it get some rules in place that are overall arcing. But I do think overall it's a good thing. So let us know what you think. If you do listen to Spotify, we'll have that poll on there. All you gotta do is click yes or no after you watch it. Like, subscribe, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Let us know what you think. Again, any ideas you guys have for topics for us to discuss, let us know. We do this for you guys as well as for ourselves. So we'd love to hear feedback and what you'd like us to do. But other than that, you guys have a good day. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.